Well, evening everyone. We've gone live slightly in the middle of our sort of behind the scenes talks, but that's how it happens. My name's Ashley. I'm one of the partners at the firm. And this evening we've got Caron Kipping. How you doing, Cameron? You all right?
I'm doing very well. I'm not very good with tech, as you can see.
Bless you. So Caron here is a divorce and separation coach who runs her own business. She is here this evening to talk to us about understanding how abuse can manifest during divorce. Same as always, guys, there's a chat function, there's a Q&A function. Pop anything in there that you'd like to know. Caron will do her talk, and at the end, we'll go through the questions, same as always. But for now, if you're happy, Caron, I'll let you get started.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's see if I can get onto the first slide. That's a good start. There we go. So yeah, we wanted to talk about how domestic abuse can manifest in divorce. It's a massive topic. All of my clients are going through some form of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a spectrum. So at the one end, you have the very extreme end of the spectrum where it's very physical abuse, it's very dangerous and stressful. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where it's more subtle and it's more coercive, controlling behavior. But generally, it's a combination of tactics that abusers use. So when one tactic isn't working as well, they'll use another tactic. And physical abuse actually often comes much further on in the relationship. So the emotional abuse, the little comments, the belittling, the put downs, the little criticisms here and there, that starts at the beginning. And then quite quickly, they want to isolate you so that they can have more power and control over you. And then in comes the financial abuse. There can be sexual abuse, and within that, it can be very coercive. And it becomes a pattern of behavior that kind of like extends as the relationship goes on. And then, of course, that if that relationship ends, whether it's you doing the leaving or them doing the leaving, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to stop having that power and control over you. So even once you've left, you can still be subjected to a lot of abuse. And that's what we call post-separation abuse. And within that, you know, particularly if you have children together, you are still essentially tied to your abuser. They will use the children as a weapon, and they will use the finances quite often. They're the two main tactics that they use, as well as, emotional abuse and gaslighting and things like that through communication. And yeah, again, it's just like another pattern of abuse that you have to manage and put up with to some extent. When you have children together, there's really not a huge amount of support available, but we'll talk about what support is available kind of towards the end. But yeah, it's like a whole pattern of different tactics that you have to learn how to manage, and you have to understand who is there to help you. So why can this type of abuse heighten during divorce? Well, I've just said it's about power and control. It's about having a sense of power and control over your partner. There's a very definite dynamic. You are not equal partners here. There's one person that is trying to keep the other person down all of the time. And when you divorce, they're losing that control, so they have to try and get it back. It's a very emotional process, obviously. They're emotional because they're losing the power and control over you, and they will absolutely use those emotions to try and manipulate you, guilt trip the children, lie and coerce and try and manipulate friends and family. And of course, you're emotional because you're essentially grieving for this family unit and this relationship that you wanted and that you hoped was going to be good and has turned out to be something completely different. So it's very emotional for you as well, and you can feel very guilty if you are the person that is essentially kind of breaking up the family. Um, they will completely deny their abusive behavior. People that are abusive don't like to accept responsibility for any of their behavior. So, of course, it's much easier for them to blame you. And so you will absolutely get the brunt and the backlash. If it's coercive behavior and you don't have a lot of evidence, like a lot of people, it can be very difficult to prove that it's been abusive. So if you're in the family court system, it's very difficult to prove coercive control. It's very difficult for professionals, people that are working with your children at school, social workers, those kind of people. It's very much, I would say, minimized, and they don't completely understand it, and they also don't have a lot of power to help legally. And then, of course, you've got the whole change in dynamics within the family unit. So you're having to try and find some confidence, and you're trying to take back a bit of control over your life, which can be quite a scary feeling when you've never had any control and any freedom. And of course, the abuser doesn't like that change in dynamics. So quite often their abusive behavior will actually get worse. And when you've got children together, you're trying to parent and co-parent with an abuser, which is, well, co-parenting is impossible with an abuser for a start. But you have children together, so you have to communicate with them, and you have to do things like where you have to transition your child from one home to another home, and you have to make decisions about your children, and trying to do that with an abuser who is very controlling, who doesn't like to negotiate, who wants things their own way all the time, is incredibly exhausting. So, how the abuse manifests in divorce, punishments for one thing. So when you are going against somebody who's in a position of power and they don't like it, they will punish you. So they might ignore you. They might ignore letters that you're sending. They might punish you financially by cutting you off, by, refusing to pay the school fees. So your son ends up with no school place. They might refuse to pay the child maintenance. They might refuse to leave the house. They might try and kick you out of the family home. There are all sorts of ways that they can punish you, kind of big punishments and small punishments. Again, it's on a spectrum. Like I said, the abuse can often escalate. So, the verbal abuse quite often turns really nasty. They will start shifting the blame and blaming you for everything. False accusations, lies, smear campaigns where they're going around telling everybody that everything is your fault. And then, of course, we've had this shift over the last few years where abusers are using this term parental alienation, and they start making these accusations that you are trying to withhold their children from them, which often is used as just another coercive, controlling tactic. It's a way of trying to shift the focus towards you and get all the professionals looking at you rather than looking at them and their behaviour and what they're doing. So they will absolutely try and use the children as a weapon. They will try and convince the children to be with them more. They will try and convince the children that you are a bad parent. Really say nasty, horrible things about you to the children to try and turn them against you. They can use the children in so many ways because they are the conduit between you. I've already said about financial support and not paying child maintenance, etc., and not contributing towards the household income anymore, hiding money. There's so many ways that they can use finances to try and make your life more difficult You know, this is what it's about. It's about punishing you again, making your life more difficult so that you back off from doing what you're trying to do. You stay with them in the relationship and you don't leave, or your life just becomes harder, and that's your punishment. So it makes communication and making decisions very, very difficult. Quite often they will use the legal process that you have to go through when you're separating. Very difficult, very expensive. And, you know, again, it goes on and on. So the key is to try and sort out the financial ties between you as quickly as you can so you can sever that tie. And then it's about trying to get some really firm boundaries in place about how you parent together regarding the children. And also having some personal boundaries to make sure that the abusive behaviour doesn't affect you as much. So how do you get that support? First of all, it's about understanding your legal rights, understanding who can help you. And there are so many ways you can get legal help now. There's lots of good free websites with lots of useful information about your legal rights. There's obviously traditional solicitors, barristers, you know, some of them you can contact through direct access. There's people like independent divorce consultants and paralegals that can help you. And then you've got specialist professionals like myself, divorce coaches that specialize in abusive relationships, who can give you that practical help as you go through the separation process and beyond. You know, I've had some of my clients for 6 years now, long after the legal process has finished, because they've still got children together with their ex, and you know, from time to time things crop up that they need support with. So divorce coaches can be great because we can talk to you about all sorts of things, not just about the legal process. It's about, you know, what practical support can we get you to support your children? What practical help can we get you financially, you know, to support you, and all sorts of other things. And then there's free specialist help from domestic abuse organisations who, again, you know, provide free, confidential, practical help and advocacy. So organisations like Women's Aid and Mankind for Men. It's very much a kind of postcode lottery, if you like, as to how much support and what kind of support you can get from these kind of charities, because they are charities. And so not every borough will have a Women's Aid organisation. It might be called something else. So literally just Google domestic abuse support in your home area and it will come up with your local service. And then you've got free legal help, like I said, from organisations like legal clinics, law clinics, where they have trainee legal professionals who can provide free advice. They have those in lots of the counties across the UK now. And then you've got specialist organisations like DV Assist and NCDV, Flag DV, Flows and Support Through Court, who are all, again, charitable organisations, but very specialist and can provide very practical help if you are going to court, you know, applying for things like injunctions, etc. And of course, there's lots on social media now, you know, on Instagram and TikTok and those kind of places. And you've got to be very careful about the advice that you're getting from these social media sites, but they can be really helpful, just in terms of gathering information and knowledge, and particularly around tactics of, you know, domestic abuse, and developing a better understanding of what you're going through to give you the confidence to get the help that you need. All right. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour around, you know, escalation of domestic abuse during divorce. You know, we could literally talk about it for a whole week because there are so many elements to it. But the key thing is that separating from these people is going to be very difficult. I can't sugarcoat it. It is difficult. that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means you need to get a team of support around you and tap into the right people, get the right help, and keep that help going throughout.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Caron. We really appreciate it. I think there was an issue with the slides in that they were sort of cut off at certain points.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not a major issue. I think we've said as long as you're happy that we'll send it round to the attendees and they can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. That works out. So yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There are so many places to get the help that you might need. I can personally speak to the NCDV. I worked with them when I was training, and they're a phenomenal organisation. I then worked with a charity, so it was a one-stop shop, is what they were called.
Yeah.
And I worked there, so there was myself there. Sometimes there was a police officer there.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we had someone from the local authority to do with housing, so
Yeah.
they can be a really good source of assistance for people if they need them. There's a couple of questions come up in the chat already. The first one came up here from Paul. What about the effects on domestic abuse on unborn children or young people? How can they be supported? So if you want to take the lead on that one, Caron, I think I've got some comments as well afterwards.
The impact on unborn children. Yeah.
Yeah, and children and young people generally.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, there's been lots of research. I used to be a midwife before I did this, and it's well documented that, around 30% of domestic abuse escalates during pregnancy. So it's very common that people will say to me, it got worse when I became pregnant, or it got worse when my son was born, because we're on about power and control. And when somebody becomes pregnant, the dynamic changes. All of a sudden you've got more professionals coming into your life, and all of those professionals are a threat to the abuser. And your priority becomes your baby, right? Not your abuser. And they don't like that. They're kind of like gone down the pecking order. So yeah, quite often the abuse gets worse. And yes, it does affect unborn children, in numerous ways. I could give you a whole long list of ways that it affects unborn children. And then, of course, it affects children of all ages, right from toddlers right all the way through. I'm literally just about to deliver some training in a couple of weeks to teachers about how to spot the signs of abuse in primary school children. It impacts so much on their physical development, their meeting their milestones, not to mention the physical risk of harm to an unborn child, and children getting caught in the crossfire of incidents, can be so dangerous. But the trauma that it does to children psychologically is so damaging, that yes, and thank goodness now a lot of domestic abuse services have children's services to provide specialist support for children. So we have play therapists now that can support children from like around age 5 upwards. And then we have specialist therapists who really understand about domestic abuse, who can help children work through all of their emotions related to, their experiences and their fears and their worries and their anger and all that kind of stuff. The key thing is to try and get the children the help at as early a stage as possible, and to really encourage that therapeutic space. But the problem I find is that because of parental responsibility, a lot of abusers will try and stop that. So you need to find a service that will accept just one parent's consent for that, or find a generic service that makes it very difficult for the abuser to refuse.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's that kind of control that will just then be ongoing.
Yeah.
And it's trying to take that power away so that you can get the child the support they need. Now, a service that I've been dealing with for years in my job is CAMS.
Yeah. But the waiting list is so long for CAMS. It's like a 2-year waiting list.
CAMS is spelled CAMHS to anyone. And the reason for the waiting list is because they're NHS.
Yeah. And they are inundated, there's so
Absolutely.
many children having mental health issues now for many reasons, not just
Of
domestic
course, of
abuse.
course.
So, they have everybody to deal with.
Mm,
But they can be really helpful once you get
mm,
into CAMS. And
absolutely. Yeah.
because it's NHS, it's seen as a very kind of credible service, whereas sometimes private services come under a bit more scrutiny because it's a private
Mm,
service and there's
of
not
course.
so much kind of regulation around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I have several kind of therapists that I signpost people to, depending on, what they can afford and where they live and that kind of thing. But it
Hmm.
can be difficult to access, but there are also lots of, like I say, charitable organisations that do provide free support for children. So it is worth having a Google and seeing what's in your local area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will start with the parent noticing more than anything.
Yeah,
It will be the child's behaviour is out of the norm.
yeah,
I can't give you exact examples because every child reacts differently. But
yeah,
suffice to say that I've seen it in my job a lot.
yeah.
Um, Sometimes the children can go much closer to the parent who's actually causing the harm
Yeah,
because they're being misled and
yeah, yeah,
all the information is being, lied. They're being lied to. Um, this can sometimes manifest in bedwetting.
yeah,
That's something that's new, that
yeah,
sort of out of the norm.
yeah,
And it's things that a parent who obviously adores their children, you will pick up on those signs.
yeah,
And there are the agencies out there that will help. And
yeah.
Karen is quite right that CAMS has got a whacking great list, but there are other out there, and don't sit on it. Those children need that help as
That's
soon
right,
as possible.
absolutely. Yeah, you've just got to keep raising your concerns with the
Yeah.
school or with the nursery or
Hmm.
whoever it is,
Yeah.
just keep talking about it, keep asking for help, go to different places trying to get the help for your child. Because you're
Absolutely.
right, you know what is normal for them and what is not, and document everything.
Yeah. I mean, I always advise my clients to get just a little book, little A5 notepad, and just note
Yeah,
down things that are out of the norm.
yeah,
And even if it starts with the GP,
yeah,
this is what I've witnessed, this is what I'm concerned about. At least at that point, you've raised it with an appropriate authority, and
yeah,
you can signpost it wherever it needs to go.
yeah. And it's
So
trying to highlight the patterns of changes of
yeah.
behavior as well, because there
Mhm.
may be very obvious patterns to you, like they might become more distressed just before they're due to go and see the
Mm.
other parent, or their behavior might be worse when they come back from the other parent, for example. So it's really important to try and keep a track of any patterns and spot those.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's important just to, any doting parent is naturally going to do sort of notice, but the important thing is to kind of jot it down
Yeah,
way, because it's like if someone says, "What have you noticed?" You've got it in front of you.
that's right.
Nobody is expected to bringing up, months potentially of information. So having that notebook, keeping it private for you,
Yeah,
not taking it out in public, very much leaving it somewhere that you trust, things of that nature. All of that can be done to sort of build that case, and then seek out the help. I can speak to CAMS as an excellent service, but you will be waiting. So if there are other services out there and you can get that help, please do. It's important that that's the case. Next one here, which I can see a couple of people have also responded to. Is it common for someone to accuse you back of abuse, i.e., emotional abuse? The short answer is absolutely. I'll let you take the lead, Karen, and then I'll jump in after.
sorry, just repeat that question again for me.
Sure. Is it common for someone to accuse you back of abuse?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we call gaslighting.
Hmm.
So they will lie, obviously, and like I said, they don't want to take responsibility for their own behavior. Why would they? As far as they're concerned, in their mind, they're not doing anything wrong and everything will be your fault. So they need to kind of twist the narrative. They need to try and justify their behavior. So they will kind of like take any bits of information to help them, twist it and turn it around and then make it your fault. So that's a really powerful tactic. And sometimes when somebody says that in a very convincing way, it sounds totally believable. And so then what happens is you start doubting yourself and you start going, well, is it me? Am I to blame? Should I have tried harder? Is it my fault? And of course, that, depletes your confidence, your self-esteem,
Mm,
and the tactic is working.
yeah,
So you've got to remember whatever comes out of their mouth really is all manipulation. It's not necessarily
cool.
the truth.
Mm,
Okay. So when somebody is accusing you of abuse, you have to question, am I abusive? Where's the evidence?
mm,
And more than likely there will be no evidence, right? And even if you have found yourself in a position where you have lashed out, where you have gone, do you know what? I've had enough, I can't take it anymore. You're not listening to me and you're just in a state of desperation and trying to be heard. And you may have shouted a bit too loud, or you may have even lashed out physically or thrown something or
mm,
whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're abusive. It means that you're just losing it under so much pressure. Like, it's like having a bottle of fizzy Coke and with the lid on and you shake it and shake it and shake it, and eventually it's going to explode. Right?
mm,
People are under such pressure when they're in these relationships, and sometimes you don't always cope as well. But don't berate yourself for that. You're only human, right?
mm,
But that needs to tell you that something needs to shift, all right? Because you don't want to end up in a situation where you are the one that is getting blamed, or it's professionals are starting to see, oh, they're just as bad as each other, because they're both going at each other, and it's kind of tit for tat and it's high conflict. It
mm.
quite often they'll label it as high conflict, but it's absolutely not high conflict. It's just that one person is really struggling to cope with the pressure that they're under from the other person.
Yeah. And I can say from my perspective, obviously I'm a lawyer, so I'm dealing with this day to day. It is so common for somebody who is, an abuser to not look inward. They would rather deflect. They would
Yeah,
rather not look at what they're doing. So it's way easier just to say, that's all you.
yeah,
Right. So it is probably the most common thing that I see, actually, is that no, none of that's me. You're the one who does that.
yeah,
You talk to me that way. You control this. You control that, and that is textbook gaslighting.
yeah,
And that can be awful when you're going through it
yeah,
because you're like, I don't think I'm that, but you're constantly being told, right? So in that moment, that's where you reach out to the people who know you best, family, friends, and say, is this really me? Is this the kind of thing that I do?
yeah,
And I think that's where your support network is so important. But
yeah.
yeah, it's very easy for me to say, it's nonsense. They're just turning it on you. But when you're going through it, that's not easy.
No, it's not.
So
And sometimes writing it down in a safe place,
mm,
writing down what's happened and how it's made you feel can be really useful later on. Because when you do start to doubt yourself a little bit, you can look back at those notes and go, oh no, actually, that wasn't okay. And I do remember how that made me feel and how upset I was about it. And then you've got your evidence, as to what's not right.
yeah, absolutely. And I can see someone's put a comment in here about this is what they're experiencing. And every time we call the police for abuse, he's claiming he's the one being abused.
Yeah.
It's atrocious. It's awful. And there's the best thing I can advise you to do is keep logging that with the police because
Keep
eventually
logging,
they'll
keep
go,
your evidence going.
absolutely, because eventually they'll go, hold on a minute. He's just been, I've had enough of cases where the police go, right, enough's enough,
Yeah.
right? There is no smoke without fire. So
Yeah.
they'll deal
And
with
I
it.
would absolutely advise anybody in that situation where they keep having police involved to get contact with their local domestic abuse organisation, get yourself an
Yeah,
IDVA, because then you can confidentially explain everything to your IDVA, and they will advocate on your behalf with the police. So
yeah,
they can go directly to the police and say, look, what the ex is saying here is not 100% true because this is the reality of her
mm,
experience, and they can really kind of help, Yeah, they can really help in a practical way.
And from my perspective, if I'm going to go to court and say this is what I've suffered, if I can say she's been to the GP,
Yeah.
she's been to an IDVA, she's been to here, she's been to there, and I can get letters from all these places. You know, him not being dealt with by the police is a minuscule part of that entire picture. So it is just staying strong, committing
That's
to
right.
it, and knowing that you're not sort of off the deep end, as it were. You're doing the right thing. Right, let's take another one from the chat, and then I'll do the Q&As. I want to talk about how to approach parallel parenting for those subject to domestic abuse.
Yeah, parallel parenting is the way to go, really. You can't co-parent with somebody like this because you're not dealing with somebody that's reasonable. You have to parent in your own way and try and minimize the communication with your ex. So you never ask them for any favors whatsoever. That's one of the top tips for parallel parenting, because if you ask them for a favor, it creates so much drama. It's just not even worth it. What they want in return is just way too much. So you're much better to build up your support network. If you need help, ask the people that you can rely on for help. Don't ask your ex, okay? So don't ask your ex, minimize your communication, use something like a parenting app to help you with the communication. They love to try and contact you via various different forms on WhatsApp and emails and, parenting apps and, different things. You need to try and contain them. So use one platform for all your communication around the children, and that should be a parenting app ideally, because they're the safest way to communicate. You can't delete messages, you can't create fake messages like you can on WhatsApp. With AI, you've got to be really careful now. So parenting apps are absolutely the safest way to go. And because there's so many features on parenting apps, you don't even have to speak to your ex. You can just upload the information to the relevant section. So it just makes life easier. All right. And it means that you can reduce the time that you have to spend giving your ex attention. All right. And dealing with the messages. So, yeah, parallel parenting is the way to go. And getting some kind of framework in place, whether that is a parenting agreement that is done through mediation, which can be hard to get there. It's hard to mediate with somebody that doesn't want to negotiate. But if you can get some kind of legally binding framework with very clear boundaries and kind of guidance about how you communicate, how you make decisions about your children, how contact arrangements take place, how handovers happen, that kind of thing, what you do in an emergency, what you do if the child is sick. If you can get something in place that is so detailed, that will really help you. All right. They are still going to push the boundaries. They're still going to tell you you're a terrible parent. They're still going to refuse to pay for the school uniform. They're still only going to pay for the activities that they want to do, right? They're still going to be difficult parenting wise. But if you can get your head in the zone of parallel parenting rather than trying to co-parent, you will be less disappointed. All right. You have to keep your expectations low in terms of their parenting, I would say, and keep your boundaries high all the time. That's what I say, because
Yeah.
they don't actually care about the impact of their behavior on the children. So if their behavior is affecting the children in a negative way, unfortunately, you're going to have to pick that up.
And from my perspective, I couldn't agree more about picking one form of communication. I have seen it where it's like, right, I'm only now going to deal with you by email. And they immediately respond, well, I'm only texting you. Now, this is where you have to be tough
Yeah.
and strong and draw your line in the sand. In that it's, no, I told you how I'm going to communicate.
Yeah.
And I will not accept any other forms. And a parenting app is brilliant. I've been advising people to use them for years. This week, I found out that you can't even type certain words in these apps if they're considered to be threatening or intimidating.
Yeah.
So they are the format. There's loads. There's My Family Wizard. There's App Close. There's
Yeah.
lots, and I can only suggest that you use them because they can be used if I need them. If you ever come to a lawyer and I need to see them, easy, right? I don't like emails flying around and texts and Teams messages and WhatsApps, whatever it may be. One, it just completely becomes all encompassing.
Yeah.
Well,
And it
you've got
makes
a
it really
job.
hard to keep track of
Yeah.
topics.
Mm,
And what was the other thing I was going to say? With the apps, I know with Our Family Wizard, I'm not sure
mm,
about App Close, but I know Our Family Wizard, if you are on Universal Credit, you can apply for their hardship fund. So if you
right.
are struggling financially, you can apply for their hardship fund and you will get it at a reduced price. So, and you can get, shared costs, written into a
Mm,
court order, if you want
mm,
them to contribute to the cost of the app. Um, family courts, that one of the positive things about family courts is they are very pro the
yeah.
parenting apps, and if you want one, you will absolutely get it.
Yeah. I'll tell you now, if the judge says, well, how are you going to communicate? And someone says, I'm not willing to do an app, they are not chuffed. So,
No, it
you
doesn't
know,
look good, does it?
no. And it's often, don't get me wrong, I think one of these is £100 for the year, I think, to subscribe. But for your mental health
Yeah,
and
it
not
can be
being
worth
pulled in
it.
six different directions, you're at work, you've got your emails, your WhatsApp, all this going off. I'm telling you now, it will make the world of difference.
Yeah,
But the most important thing is to draw your line in the sand.
yeah,
This is the only way you can communicate with
yeah,
me, right? Emergencies are a bit different,
yes,
but that's what you consider an emergency is a child has broken their leg,
yeah,
right? Not they left their PE bag at home
yeah,
today.
that's right.
That's how they try and work their way in.
Yeah,
So that's where you app for absolutely everything except emergencies is a call. But if the calls start to become like that, then it will have to be, well, you message me on the app then.
yeah,
I'll check it,
yeah.
and that will have to be
And
the
you
way.
can do video calls for the children through the apps now. You can do emergency calls through the app, so they don't
Yeah,
have to have your phone number anymore.
nope.
So that's a really positive thing
Yeah.
about the parenting apps as well.
But parallel parenting is the way to go. You will not negotiate with them. You will not get them to do anything without getting something back. It's just not. It just won't happen.
No,
I've seen it too many times, and I just say to people, well, then don't offer it. You
yeah,
can't rely on them. You can't because it'll always be, well, I did this for you, so.
yes,
Or if you do them a favour, expecting them to do one back, they won't.
no,
So if you're dealing with someone like that, don't rely on them. Family, friends, the people that actually care and love you, right? Rely on them. All
that's right.
right.
Yeah.
So let's go to the Q&As. Let's jump in here. So you said not paying child support is an abuse. Can you explain that, please?
Not paying child support, yeah, because that's part of financial abuse. That's the way that they will try and punish you financially. I had one of my clients yesterday said, because her ex hasn't paid the child maintenance and it's done through the child maintenance service.
Hmm.
And he said, well, I'm not seeing my son, so I'm not paying it. I've been told that I don't have to pay it. And I burst out laughing. I
What
was like,
nonsense.
don't be so
Absolutely.
ridiculous. You still have to pay for your
Hmm.
child. They still cost money,
Yeah.
whether you're seeing them or not. So although child maintenance, the amount that they have to pay is linked to how much time they spend with them
Yeah.
overnight. Like, it doesn't mean that if you're not seeing your child, you don't pay, right?
No. Quite
So
right.
again, yeah, finances and not paying child maintenance is very common. And I always recommend to use the child maintenance service where you can because they do, although, child maintenance service has its flaws, right? But they set the amount of how much should be paid. So you can't be blamed for saying, oh, you have to pay X amount. It's the child maintenance service that is making that calculation, not you.
Mhm.
And if they don't pay it, then they can go to collect and pay. They can get it straight out of their wages, right? More difficult if they're self-employed, right? But if they are in paid work, regular work, and they're paying tax, then they can take it straight out of their wages. And I believe that from next year, everybody that goes through child maintenance service is going to be under collect and pay. So that's the route that they're going down. But there's also other things that they can do to try and get that money back and try and get arrears back. So they can, seize their assets, they can do things with their passports, they can add on financial penalties. So there's all sorts of things that they can do. Um, if, yeah, if sorry, that's kind of distracted me. That message popping up a bit there. But maintenance is definitely one of the ways that they will financially abuse.
Yeah, and child maintenance for me, service, sorry, is the only way to go. I've
And
seen
the thing is, if you get a financial order and child maintenance is part of that order, that can be okay to start off with. But then if they suddenly stop paying, then you're in a position where you're then having to pay to go back to court to enforce that order.
Mm,
So that's where the child maintenance service can be a bit more helpful because it's there and it should be running all the
yeah,
time. We
they're an
can't stop
outside
people from
agency.
trying to be devious and claim that they're not earning as much as they are actually earning. But
And this is it, they're an outside agency. They will do it all for you. They'll do the calculations. Like you say, they'll take it out of the account if there's any nonsense. So in some cases, I just say to people, don't fight, don't argue, go straight down that route
yeah,
and just let them set it up. And then
yeah,
if they then come to you and say, I'd like to set it up privately, but they're prone to doing this kind of thing, no,
no,
be the bad guy. Say, no,
yeah.
I'm going to let them take
Because
it. Yes,
it leaves you really vulnerable if they're voluntarily paying you a set amount each month and then they get in a bad mood one month because you haven't abided by one of the rules that they've set you, they're going to punish you by saying, well, I'm not paying you this week. And then all of a sudden you're in a really vulnerable
mm,
financial position.
mm,
So I always say try not to rely heavily on maintenance money because even with the child maintenance service, they can put in an appeal or they can question the amount that's been set and then it pauses. But, you know, generally, once it's up and running with the child maintenance service, at least you are getting that money in.
yeah. And whilst the child maintenance service do take a little bit of a fee if you go down that route, at least you know what's hitting your account, and
That's right.
that's
That's
the
right.
thing, right? Complete. It's one of those things where you could rely on them, but what if they don't make a payment in December, and you are completely reliant on that money for some gifts or whatever it may be? And for me, I genuinely don't know how much. Let's just, for argument's sake, say £25 off the top, right? But to get the remainder, it's a no-brainer for me. I
Yeah.
just think that that's the route to go down.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So the next one in the Q&A is, you said parental alienation is an abuse tactic. Can you explain more about this?
Okay. So there was this theory that came about parental alienation a few years ago, and unfortunately, a few abusers have kind of like gained momentum, and it's all become this big concept, pseudo science concept, really. Um, but really, it's just another tactic of coercive control. So abusers will claim parental alienation against their victims. So they will say, for example, that the abuser is the male, then the mother is preventing me from seeing my children. They're turning the children against me. That's why they don't want to come and see me, etc. And it's like attack, attack, attack on the mother, when really, in reality, that may not be the situation at all. It may be that the children don't want to go and see the abuser because they're abusive, right?
Mhm.
It's just genuine. They just don't have a great relationship with them. They don't want to see them. But rather than the abuser looking inwards, like you said, Ashley, and reflecting on their own behaviour and thinking, well, why don't my children really want to see me? Why are they behaving in these ways? Why are they saying these things? Oh, let's blame the mother instead.
Right.
Let's just put the finger of blame on her, so it's all her fault. And unfortunately, when people say things so convincingly, you know, again, they're gaslighting. They can gaslight the legal professionals, they can gaslight the judges, you know, it can be really powerful. So again, it all comes down to evidence and proofing and trying to empower your children to find their voice and talk about how they really feel and what they want. You know, the fear around parental alienation can feel really tough. You know, because people can start saying things like, right, well, I'm going for transfer of residency then, and you know, and we need to get psychologists involved and we need to get these people involved, and it just can really kind of like blow up into this big thing when actually everybody starts to lose sight of what is really going on. And what's really going on is one person just trying a different way to keep that power and control over the other person. And that is not okay. So, yeah, there have been a lot of moves within the family courts to try and shut down this momentum of false allegations, which is essentially what it is, parental alienation. And then, of course, you've got the reverse parental alienation, which is where one parent, sorry, who is abusive is intentionally turning that child against the other parent, you know, because they want to break down that relationship. So they will twist things and they will lie to the child so convincingly to gaslight their own child and use that child as a weapon against the other parent. And again, that is such a sad situation. I think that's the lowest of the low. When you can do that to your own child to such an extent, just because you can't stand the other person that didn't want to be in a relationship with you anymore, I think that is just, you know, rock bottom. You know,
and it's the kind of thing that unfortunately I'm seeing sort of the rise of in my job.
yeah, me too, and I've got another support group for mothers that have now unfortunately, you know, lost that relationship with their child through that tactic, and it's brutal, it's so sad.
It's awful, and I think, you know, whilst this is not the great, you know, the way to do everything, but in the court proceedings now, you know, children, as they always have, will always speak to somebody from CAFCAS or maybe social services. And what the judges are on the lookout for now is reports where the judge says, or sorry, the children are asked, well, why don't you want to see mum? Of course, there's no logical reason, right? It's because dad has said this, dad has said that. And what then actually comes out is the judge goes, right, I can see what's happening here. So, you know, people may well not be aware you can represent yourself in court proceedings. You don't have to have a lawyer. In most cases where there is a dispute, a judge will direct something called a Section 7 report, which is where somebody does an in-depth piece of work with you and the other parent and the children. And if they believe coaching has been going on, because that's what they're trained to spot, they will say it. So I can only ever advise you that if, you know, money is an issue and maybe legal aid isn't available to you, at least get to that stage where there is professionals speaking to the children and getting to the bottom of it. Because I've had one of these cases recently where mum said this, that, and the other. We ended up spending a lot of money and a lot of time, and the judge effectively said this is complete lies. And we were very close, you know, and I think someone's just in the chat, you know, men can be subject to domestic abuse. Absolutely. That's what happened in this case.
Yeah.
And the judge was inclined to say, no, the mother has absolutely lied about what's gone on. There is parental alienation, and I'm going to put these children with their father because I'm so concerned by it.
Yeah. And I've got a men's support group now, exactly for those kind of situations, because unfortunately I am seeing an increase in mothers using their children as a weapon and using the legal system, and those kind of unconscious biases about how a mother should be deemed to be the protective parent, but they're absolutely, you know, twisting that and using that to manipulate the children. And again, so sad for those fathers, you know, who are really good dads and who just want to be present in their children's lives, that are being prevented from doing so by these false allegations.
Absolutely. And all I've ever said to people is, if you're telling me the truth, then you've got nothing to hide. Let's go ahead. Let's put your
Right.
case on, because lies bring on more lies, and judges are not silly. They've seen and heard it all, and they will see through people if there is actual nonsense going on. And that goes on whether it's male, females, it doesn't matter. You are a right to see your children. And if they're not wanting to see you right now, and a judge says, okay, there's an alienation's been going on, they will then recommend therapy that unpicks all of that. All of that, and then we'll build that relationship again. So alienation is on the rise. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you, Caron. It's absolutely god awful. And I won't have it.
It's just so
I don't.
sad that quite often it takes quite a long time for professionals to see what is going on.
Yeah.
I find in those early days when you don't have a lot of evidence and when the children are not so vocal, maybe they're too young or they're
Mm,
just not confident enough to really kind of
mm,
speak the truth about how they feel, they
yeah.
can be very easily manipulated. And if you've got an abuser who can come across as quite charming, quite articulate, very calm, because not all abusers are kind of like, your stereotypical kind of like rough and ready kind of like abuser. They're
Yeah.
absolutely not. They come in all shapes, sizes, forms, can be totally charming and
Absolutely.
say
Yeah.
all the right things. And it can be very difficult for professionals to spot. And
Mm,
sometimes it takes a long time or it takes a lot of interventions before somebody starts to say, actually, hang on a minute, let's have a look at this because this has been going on for a while now, all right? And whilst
mm,
we might have thought the children were struggling a bit because of the initial breakup and the change in transitions between two homes, etc., actually, we're 3 years down the line now, and things seem to be getting worse or nothing is improving, and why is that? And then professionals will start to question deeper, why is
yeah.
this still going on, what's happening? And it's really important to try and get that expert help from
Mm,
domestic abuse services, somebody that really understands the dynamics, who can advocate on your behalf and try and challenge professionals when they're maybe being
mm,
duped by the abuser and hoodwinked and and lied to.
yeah. And that's very, very relevant for my job. I can say to the court, no, you're not following the right guidance. These concerns have been raised. We are entitled to raise them in this way, and I don't feel they've been investigated. So have those people around you that aren't willing just to bend to, oh, it's too much effort, or you're not going to get what you're looking for here. I don't agree. I think if
Yeah.
it's a genuine position and you feel like that's the truth and you want to pursue it, you are fully entitled to do so. All right.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of ones that are more specifically probably for me here, Caron, so I'll quickly knock those
Okay.
ones
Yeah.
out. Couple of questions. Do you think it makes a significant difference to outcomes if you have a lawyer who gets high conflict and mediation, but is not fully informed about coercive control and pathological manipulators? It's difficult to say realistically because in this line of work, you see a bit of everything, right? So it's important that you are completely empathetic to your client's position and that you pick it all up. If somebody is perhaps saying, oh no, I don't agree with you, and you're absolutely certain, you've spoken to the agencies or you've got people that know this is going on, then maybe that isn't the solicitor for you. Maybe you do need to find someone who is a bit more trained in those areas specifically. But in family law, we tend to be quite good, I think, at that, at being more empathetic, about making sure that you're heard and putting forward everything that you're entitled to. So if you feel like you're not getting that, you are entitled to look elsewhere to find it. There's no problem with that. Second part of that is, can a direct access barrister who is just as well versed in psychological abuse do the same job? Your direct access barrister is obviously different to a solicitor in that your solicitor formally goes on the record. We do all the letters. We help you day to day, everything that you'd need. Yes, there's a charge for all of that. And your direct access barrister is as available, yes. But as you can imagine, your barrister is flying all across the country every day, different days of the week, dealing with tons of different cases. You're probably not going to get as much one-to-one with a direct access barrister, and that's certainly not a negative comment. It's just they have a different role in that, you know, one day they'll be doing this case, the next they'll be doing something else. So being able to focus on you maybe as much as the solicitor would be, maybe not, but can they do the same job? Yes. You know, that's the truth of it. We're all trained in the same kind of way. Your barrister is known for doing the court hearings primarily, but there is nothing stopping you instructing a barrister and asking them to answer your questions or check letters or draft these bits for you. You know, they'll charge no differently to say I would. And that's a personal choice. But the overriding answer is yes, we can both do the same kind of job. It's just what kind of level you're looking for, really. So hopefully I answered that for you. Next one is another solicitor. During court proceedings, if you lose faith in your solicitor's approach to domestic abuse or the costs are unaffordable, can you switch to a direct access barrister to help to get you through the hearings? Obviously, after informing. So yes, in reality, I've probably answered that. The short answer is yes. As long as you tidy up your, you know, what people might not know is your solicitor doesn't have to release your file to you unless your bills are all paid up. Of course, if there's a complaint, things of that nature, then that's handled slightly differently. But if you're just coming to the end of that arrangement, as long as you've paid those bills up, they'll release your file to you. And yes, you can instruct yourself a direct access barrister, no problem at all. They'll come up with a payment arrangement with you and they'll do everything. But it's just a different level of involvement, really.
And what I would say, Ashley, is it is very common for people to change solicitors from time to time, because you might start off with one solicitor at the beginning and then you might find a bit further on that you need to change strategy, or you need a solicitor who's got a slightly different approach, or maybe you know, you don't feel as supported by that solicitor, or maybe you are growing in confidence and you actually feel, actually, I want to self-represent because I want to have my day in court and I want to have my voice heard. You know, some of my clients, they don't have a choice about being litigants in person because they just can't afford legal help. And they're in that middle bit where they're not entitled to legal aid and they can't quite afford legal help. And it can feel very scary to be in a courtroom, particularly if your ex has got a barrister or a solicitor. But what I would say to people is that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get everything they want. You know, the facts are the facts, right? And judges, I find, are actually very empathetic to litigants in person because they know that you don't understand the law. And this is a whole new forum for you. And it is a very tense process. And, you know, now they've brought in these qualified legal representatives to help at certain stages and certain hearings, which, you know, can be helpful. But so it's really about what kind of level of legal support you can afford, and be realistic from the get-go. You know, there's no point instructing a solicitor that, you know, is from a top London firm and is going to have a whole team of people working on your case if you're going to run out of money halfway through. And that happens quite regularly. I get clients saying, I've spent X amount of money and now I've run out and now I have to be a litigant in person. That is the worst case scenario. You know, go in at the level that you can afford and be consistent with that. And you know, if you need recommendations for professionals, don't go recommended by a friend who had a completely different type of separation to you, because, you know, dealing with a kind of normal divorce, you know, just somebody that's fallen out of love with their spouse, is very different to dealing with a divorce where you're up against somebody who's very controlling and abusive.
Absolutely. Just to check, Caron, we normally come up to 6:30, which is when we normally finish. Are you all right to stay a little bit longer to do a few more questions, or do you need to go?
I can hang on for a few minutes.
Okay, no worries. You just give me a nod if it's starting to go a bit long. All right. So the short answer from my side of that is, with a solicitor arrangement, you must always remember you are in control.
Yeah.
All right. You know, good lawyers, you know, blow my own trumpet a little bit, should be saying to you from the beginning, I don't want to take this on if halfway through I'm going to have to leave you in the lurch. There's nothing worse than having all that support and then going, right, I've run out of money and now I've got all this, I've got reports coming in, I've got things to do, and you haven't got the money left. So be honest with your lawyer from the beginning.
Yeah.
If this is how much I've got, maybe they'll find you a more junior member of the team. If they're really not going to be able to help you, they should say so, right? Up front. So another one in the Q&A, very specific. That one probably needs to be answered with proper legal advice, to be completely honest, about university and a husband supporting some children who are over 18. The short answer to that is the sum that you've said that their income is, it's not high, it's not low. What the court looks at is their available disposable income as to whether they can assist to help you or not. So if they're paying for their own property and their outgoings and they've got £100 left, then no. The reality is I don't think they're going to be asked to then contribute. However, if they've got £3,000 spare every month, now that's different. They can contribute and still live the comfortable life that they're leading. So if you've got a solicitor already, I would go back to them and maybe ask them to break down, which they would owe you, why you can't pursue it, and ask them in a bit more detail. And if you feel like you don't get the answer you're looking for, then we do, initial sum calls with clients here. I've got no problem with any of that. If you wanted to sort of reach out to me and book a call in so I can talk you through that in a bit more depth. But any solicitor worth their salt should be saying to you, these are the reasons, and setting them out for you. All right. Okay, so I've answered those two. Let's do one back from the chat. How do you process the feeling of injustice?
Yeah, that is a process in itself. That is a process in itself. Because what you're doing is you're going through a grieving process of, what should have happened and what did happen, and then you're trying to come out the other side, and kind of your goal is to try and move towards acceptance of what happened. And that can be really difficult if you felt that you've been unheard, disbelieved, the abuse that you've suffered that has been so awful has been minimized and dismissed and that kind of thing, and you've come across so many barriers. That can be really difficult because it shouldn't happen. Like, you shouldn't have to go through that experience. You shouldn't have all these barriers to jump over, to get the help that you need. And that is something that, some of my clients do really struggle with, that sense of injustice. It is very difficult to leave this kind of relationship. It shouldn't be this difficult in this day and age. There should be way more help available. But what I would say is, please don't let that eat you up. If you've managed to get out of that relationship, that is amazing. Like, a lot of people don't even have the strength and courage to be able to do that. So if you've done that, you deserve a huge pat on the back for that. And even though life may be hard now, you still hopefully have a bit of respite from the abuse and the post-separation abuse. Life can get easier as it goes on. So if it feels really hard right now, just, hold on, because hopefully it won't always be this difficult. Yeah. Everybody that has come out of an abusive relationship feels a sense of injustice, because inevitably you will lose out financially. It took me years to recover financially. It takes you years to recover emotionally. Your recovery and healing from this takes a lot of effort and persistence, and you can't carry around the baggage for the rest of your life. You have to let it go. If other people didn't support you, if they didn't believe you, that's their problem, right? And you just have to kind of reframe it and think, well, they didn't support me, or they didn't believe me, or they made life difficult because they didn't understand. They weren't educated in it. They didn't understand. Perhaps it wasn't even personal to you. It's just systemic failure, and you bore the brunt of it. And it is really hard when you are losing out financially when you can see your children hurting because of it. But you've got to try and reframe it and flip round and find some positives. Right? The positives that you're safe, that you have a roof over your head. Yes, you may be struggling for money and you might have to repay your debts for a while, but at least you're out of the relationship. You know, you can try to focus on the little bits of freedom that you do have and the little bits of joy that you find in every day and try and build on those. And the more effort and energy you can put into that, the more the kind of like the negative memories and the bad feelings that will kind of dissipate. But yeah, therapy can help and counseling to try and help you process that anger and that frustration and sadness about everything that you've been through, and the injustice. Yeah. And
Yeah,
getting
it doesn't.
involved in campaigns as well. There's lots of campaigns that are going on. Domestic Abuse Commissioner has got a Voices program now where survivors of domestic abuse can get involved and they can share their experiences and really try and input to improve things. You know, it might not help you, but it might help somebody else in the future. So that can be a way of feeling like you're doing something positive with your negative experience. And of course, lots of people end up going into, you know, working for domestic abuse services, volunteering, fundraising for them, you know, to feel like you're giving back a little bit and you're doing something positive to help other people in similar situations.
Absolutely. That feeling of injustice does ebb away. I know that's really easy for me to say, but it does, and it takes time.
Yeah,
But having good people around you is the most important thing.
that's right.
All right, so we'll field you one more, Caron.
Okay.
How do you know the difference between normal behaviour within divorce and abuse, such as gaslighting?
Well, there's lots of resources online that will very easily tell you what is a healthy relationship and what is not. If you look in the last chapter of my book, there's a template there that says healthy relationship, unhealthy relationship. And so it will give you all the different types of behaviors. So it really is about educating yourself. It's how it feels to you as well. You know, if you said to your friend, you know, my ex criticizes me every time I cook my dinner, you know, as an isolated thing, your friend will probably go, well, yeah, I'm a rubbish cook as well, and my husband doesn't like my cooking, right? But if you then put that together with loads of other behaviors and those behaviors are constant, then that can feel really oppressive and controlling. And so that's what I would say. It's looking at the patterns, it's looking at how it makes you feel, it's looking at behind the behaviors also at somebody's intention. You know, why are they saying these things to me? Why are they doing these things to me? Is it because they genuinely don't think they've got a problem? Is it because they genuinely don't understand how it impacts on me? In which case, we need to start communicating better. Or is it that they are doing it on purpose? They're doing it deliberately to make me feel bad because that makes them feel better and they thrive on that. In which case, that's abuse.
Yeah. And I think, if you've got a lawyer involved during the divorce, they would be able to normally pick that up pretty quick and
And
say, no,
abusers all say and do very, very similar
oh,
things.
very.
It's all textbook stuff,
Yes.
right? So, you know, they will all say certain things, do certain things. So when I have clients in my first meetings, they'll say, oh, you know, they do this and they say that, and I go, yep, well, just from
Okay.
the half a dozen things that you've told me then, I can 100% tell you that's an abusive relationship because I've heard that a million times before.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, the main differences are if they're trying to be a bit more harsh on what money you should get at the end of a divorce, that's more limited to they don't like how the divorce is going. If they're particularly cruel,
Yes.
that's more the gaslighting and the abuse.
Yeah.
So people find divorce stressful. They equate it to, the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah.
When you go through a divorce,
Yeah.
you get your anger, you get your understanding, you first get your upset. So they're going to say and do things that maybe are out of the norm. But if it's not spiteful,
Yes.
trying to cause you harm, then that is just the stress of that divorce process. Not everyone, let's not all forget, divorce is not always a two-way thing. One party might want it and the other one doesn't. So they're going to be a bit more on edge and maybe say things they don't mean. But there is a line that they cross when that goes over into abuse, where you are being called names and being told you're a terrible parent, or all of those things that take it past the threshold of what I would say is acceptable.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout, but a little bit of, oh, I can't believe you're going to take me for my pension. That's your divorce side. That's upset. That's understanding that unfortunately they're going to have to give up something they didn't want to. There is a difference.
Yes. Yeah. 100% agree.
And I will answer, well, to cover this last one. Someone has been told not to use the word abuse when dealing with children who are 17 and 19, and when is it age appropriate to use this word? Children at that age are exceptionally perceptive. They are coming into their adulthood really quite strongly at that point. And I think that it's hard to be said, don't use the word abuse. I think we've already moved it away from the word violence to the word abuse because it covers so many different areas. And I think that maybe don't use the word abuse, but maybe just have a conversation with them. You know, they're old enough at this point that they don't need to be shielded if they've seen it themselves. You know,
you have to remember you're role modeling for your children, and at that age they are going to start getting into their own relationships.
Absolutely.
So you have to teach them what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And if you don't teach them that, you will probably find that they will end up in a very similar relationship if you're not careful, and that is the last thing that you want to happen for your children.
You know, I see it all the time in my cases. Obviously, I can't give you any specific examples, but you know, we've got the school writing to us saying this child is using terminology towards the other gender that is not appropriate. And unfortunately, that's all picked up from home. So at the ages of 17 and 19, I think they're at the point where you can sit them down and say, look, this is what's gone on. You've witnessed maybe some of that. That's not appropriate. I want to shield you from that. They are your parent, you know, we're doing this genderless, as it were. You can still spend time with them if you wish, but you've still got to know that that behavior is unacceptable.
That's right.
In whatever form it may be. And I don't want that now to be passed on to you because, you know, abusers are often very then similar to children that they then deal with. You know, no, you can't have this, no, you can't have that, you're this, you're that. And it's a cycle that you can break. And I'm sorry, I think the word abuse is probably appropriate for a lot of that behavior. So you are their parent. You are the person who's supposed to guide them. And if you feel that that's what's going on, use that word as far as I'm concerned. And then just to cap up, really, I've seen a couple of people in the chat saying that they've been going through massive divorce cases. They've spent a hell of a lot of money and it's not at the end. And one lady in particular said their mental health is really low. It's so easy. I know I've said this a lot to sort of say stay with it, but you must. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There are people who care, such as myself, Caron, other divorce, coaches and experts that you will have seen on this podcast and webinar who do care and who want to help you. And you've got to stay the course. I know Caron
keep going. It will get better. Keep speaking your truth. Keep trying to get the help that you need for yourself and for your children. Get all of the help that you can around you. Create this support team of people around you, and keep going. Don't give up, because if you're giving up, then they've won. And the abuse was for nothing. And the kind of best revenge, if you like, for abuse is to live a happy, healthy, successful life. It's to thrive, no matter what they do and what they've done to you, is to, stick two fingers up to them and say, sod you, I'm not putting up with that anymore. You have to dig deep. You have to get that inner fight and that resilience to go, no, I'm not putting up with that anymore, And everybody gets to that place in their own time. And sometimes you do go low before you find that inner fight that you need. But then you've got to be determined, all right? And even when you get a little knockback, you've got to just kind of like, deal with it, shake it off and keep going.
Yeah. And that's, the support of the people closest to you is where you really need to lean on.
Yeah.
The people that care about you the most will want to help you.
Yeah.
You're not a burden to them.
Yeah.
That
You don't
are
need a lot of people around you. You just need the
no,
right people.
absolutely right. I've got 2 friends that I rely on for everything. That's it, only 2,
Yeah.
but that's all I need because
Yeah.
they give me what I'm looking for out of
Yeah.
that friendship and that support network and all that kind of stuff. So to anyone reading that, anyone that's put a message down that I didn't get to, I can only apologise. I think we covered a lot. I'm sure this kind of topic will come round again, so please engage again. And anything that you need, please reach out for help. There's plenty of things out there. Caron and I are the kind of people that want to help you.
Yeah.
So if you're not in our area of the country or anything like that, find similar like-minded people.
I've got
Really,
clients all over the UK, and I'm on all the socials, so they can follow me on socials for tips and
yeah,
strategies, and
yeah,
I'm happy to help if anybody wants to make any inquiries.
yeah,
I've got a range of resources, free resources and paid for
yeah,
resources, depending on what you need really. So
absolutely.
don't struggle alone is what I would say.
Absolutely. And my details are on the Stowe website. We've got tons of lawyers who'd be there to happy and help and have a discussion with you. So, Caron, I can't thank you enough.
We
Thank you
could have
so
talked
much
all
for
week.
attending. Couldn't be just, right? And
Thank
thank
you.
you everyone for attending. I
Yeah.
hope you found it helpful. And, we love doing these because we like getting the message out. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a
All
lovely
right.
evening. And thank you again, Caron. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you for having me.
Bye bye, guys.